Thanks for your interest in my mission trip to Zambia in June and July. I want to especially thank my congregation, Hillcrest Baptist Church in Austin, for making this trip possible. It's a big commitment for a church to loan out their pastor for 5 long weeks, but Hillcrest has always been a big supporter of international missions. Zambia is located in southern Africa. It was once joined with Zimbabwe as a British colony called Rhodesia, and English is still a primary language. Since it's located in the southern hemisphere, Zambia experiences a mild winter time in July, with lows in the mid-40s and highs in the mid-60s Fahrenheit. I suppose when most people think of Africa, they think of exotic animals, and I got to see a few at the Chamanyuka Game Park. And of course, Zambia has the Victoria Falls, where the Zambezi River between Zambia and Zimbabwe drops off 800-foot cliffs. Now, these photos were taken from another trip. I didn't schedule in a visit to the falls on this trip, but it was a spectacular sight when I first saw them in 1996. This trip in 2009 was a return trip for me. I brought a group to Zambia 13 years ago, and I worked with Meshach Zulu as he began the work of starting International Baptist Church. Meshach and I worked together again on my trip in 2009. He's still serving as pastor of International Church, and he's also the administrator of the Baptist Seminary where I taught. The purpose of my trip was to work with leaders like Meshach in the Baptist Fellowship of Zambia, and also to work with missionaries in the Baptist Mission of Zambia, which is part of our International Mission Board. Now, I want this slideshow to be more than simply a report on how I spent my summer. So let me introduce to you not just what I did, but what we can do in partnership with Zambian national leaders and IMB missionaries in service to Zambia. First, we can sponsor a student at the Baptist Theological Seminary. The seminary is a small, accredited institution that prepares Zambian pastors for church service. The main purpose of my 5 weeks in Zambia was to teach a course at the seminary. I stayed on campus. My flat was the one on the right side of this duplex. And I taught second and third year students a course on worship. We reviewed what the Bible has to say about congregational worship, and I offered some practical suggestions for improving worship experiences. For $1,200 a year, we can put a student in seminary housing like this, and we can provide the tuition for his required classes, like the one I taught. I met young men at the seminary like Gracious and David in this photo, who are making a great sacrifice to prepare for a lifetime of church service. And I met Lawrence, who has just started at the seminary. Lawrence told me he was led to Christ in 2006 through a relationship with one of our IMB missionaries, Josh Bowman. After Josh discipled him for a year, Lawrence began a church in 2008. His church has released him to complete his seminary training, and then he plans to return to them in a few years. My friend Ezra Musunda is the seminary principal, and I would be happy to tell him that our church, and maybe certain individuals, are ready to help him prepare pastors to serve the churches of Zambia. Here's another thing we can do to partner with Zambian leaders and IMB missionaries. We can support the 1-week Bible schools to train pastors and lay leaders. This effort would impact people like Esron, who leads the Mafungo Baptist Church. 3 times a year, week-long Bible schools are held at points all around Zambia, and these schools are part of a non-diploma program to train pastors and lay leaders in Bible study and Sunday school leadership, church history, and deeper theological understanding. I met Esron when I traveled out to his community with Van Thompson, one of our IMB missionaries. Esron had been doing evangelistic work in his community, and he asked us to show the Jesus film as an outreach project. We brought a generator, plugged in the AV equipment, set up the screen, and as the stars came out and the film began, about 100 people assembled to watch the outdoor program. 21 people placed their faith in Christ that night. Pray for the Mafungo Baptist Church as they follow up on these new believers and as they involve them in steps for spiritual growth. Now, Esron may never get a chance to attend the seminary in the capital city of Lusaka, where I was teaching, but he participates in 2 non-diploma training programs. One is weekly TEE, Theological Education by Extension, and he also attends the week-long Bible schools that are organized 3 times a year. Here are some people in other rural churches that I visited who are also involved in TEE. Most of those involved in Theological Education by Extension each week also participate in the week-long Bible schools held throughout Zambia at periodic times during the year. Here's one of my favorite photos. A young couple with baby along are completing their coursework for Theological Education by Extension. And here is Mwane, the headman for the Twikatane village in the Chongwe district. Mwane is not only headman for his village, but he is also a Baptist pastor. On the day I visited in their village, he and the young couple and the others from the area received their certificates for completing a 12-week Theological Education by Extension coursebook. As I said, most participants in weekly TEE coursework also participate in the week-long Bible schools held at points throughout the country 3 times a year. And one way that we can support the Bible schools is to ensure that some of the best trained lay leaders in our own church get a chance to go to Zambia and provide training in the schools. I hope to lead a trip in 2010 during one of the Bible schools, so be thinking about the people who should join me. Here's a third thing we should do. Link with Baptist Global Response to provide home health care kits. Franklin and Paula Kilpatrick have been IMB missionaries to Zambia for 30 years, and they served as my hosts for my trip this summer. Here you can see Paula talking with a chaplain in the Zambian military. She's in a shipping container filled with 5-gallon buckets from Baptist Global Response. I lent a hand getting those buckets into the military transport truck, and I learned something about BGR in the process. Baptist Global Response is an agency of Southern Baptists who look for ways to provide practical action in assistance to Southern Baptist international missions. One thing they do is mobilize churches to pack 5-gallon buckets with supplies that are needed by families who minister to someone dying of AIDS. The Home Healthcare Kit project for 2009 comes to an end in a few weeks, so it's too late for us to participate for this year. But let's look for ways to participate in the work in 2010. In the meantime, you can go online to baptistglobalresponse.com to find out more about all they do. Finally, here's one more thing we can do to connect our church with the work going on in Zambia. We can find Penpals for children. Here's a photo I took on the campus of the school in Twikatane. I hope to find an elementary school near Hillcrest that might want to partner with the Twikatane Government School for exchanging pen pal letters. But I think some or all of the children in our own Hillcrest Kids Ministry might want to be pen pals with a smaller community of children I found. The Twin Palm Baptist Church that meets on the Seminary campus in Lusaka opens its doors to a local orphanage, and I think we could find simple ways to connect our kids with the kids of that orphanage in a way that would be both helpful and educational. So, there are some practical things we can do in partnership with Zambian leadership and IMB missionaries. And it's all to the end of seeing new people become believers, starting new churches, and strengthening the work of our existing churches. Well, thanks for your interest in this work, and be praying about the ways that God would have you link up with the work He's doing in Zambia.